So hi everyone, my name is Alex, and today we're going to talk about UX and blockchain applications, and specifically what we can all do to build distributed applications that people can actually use. So a little bit about myself. I'm the CEO of Near Protocol, one of the co-founders. I was engineer number one at MemSQL. It's a distributed database company. So it's a sharded database, right, which is going to be very relevant in a quick second. Before MemSQL, that was a decade ago, I was working for Microsoft. And before Microsoft, when I was back in college, I was participating in competitive programming competitions. And there's one particular one which is highly regarded as a world championship in competitive programming, where back in 2008, I got a gold medal. And so we started Near Protocol last year. It's one of the youngest layer 1 protocol companies in the industry. And the idea why we started Near Protocol was to build a sharded blockchain, right? And when we started it, the hypothesis was the following: for blockchain to scale, ultimately you cannot have the blockchain limited by the processing power of a single machine, even if the machine is very powerful. And at that point, if you read most of the proposed protocols, such as Thunder, Dfinity, Algorand, Space Mesh, you name it, they were all scaling beyond what Ethereum can offer. But they were still all limited in one way or another by the capacity of a single machine, right? There were very few protocols proposed at that point that were sharded. Ethereum at that point was already talking about sharding. And I guess Zilliqa was one of the most well-known at that point. However, what Zilliqa importantly does not do is Zilliqa does not shard the state. Zilliqa shards processing, meaning that no node will process every transaction. Every node will only process the subset of transactions, which is good for scalability. But every node still has to store the entire state, right? And any of you who ever tried to synchronize Ethereum state today knows that it's a pain. And if you're now imagine that state being generated not by one Ethereum, but by 100 Ethereums, right? So it's 100 times bigger. It will become completely impossible to synchronize it. And so not seeing any good sharded solution on the market, we started Near to build a proper sharding solution. Right, and so around that idea, we built a team which consisted of few early MemSQL engineers. Practically everybody who's not from MemSQL was from Google. And majority of engineers, the median experience is 8 years in the industry. 4 people on the team out of 11 engineers at this point are ACPC Gold finalists. And we have 4 ACPC Gold medals. One of us has 2, one of us has 0, but on average, each of us has 1. And we have funding from the tier 1 investors, right? So it's Metastable, Electric, Accomplice, Baidu, a few others. Cool. So we're not going to talk much about sharding today. The talk today is about UX. If you're interested in sharding, we have some very good write-ups about it. We have convenient short links for them: near.ai/shard1 and near.ai/shard2. The first one is a very good overview of sharding, and the second one talks about unsolved problems. Today, the research is not there to build sharding, right? Neither Ethereum nor us nor anyone else actually knows how to build proper secure sharding. That blog post talks about unsolved problems. It's from December, and nothing changed by now. Each problem we talk about there is still unsolved. There's also Shard 3, where I'm talking about, it's a video recording of my talk at the Graph Day. That's if you're interested in sharding. OK, so we started building sharding. We started exploring more the space. And then what we learned quickly is this. This is a screenshot from a website called DApp Radar. And one particular column which is interesting here is the column number 4. Column number 4, the one that for My Crypto Heroes has the value 1.7K. That 1.7K is the number of daily active users. The most popular DApp on Ethereum today has 1.7 thousand daily active users. The second most popular has below 1,000, right? Majority of people, well, not majority, but I'm pretty sure that at least some of you back in the day built, online games which have more have daily active users just, in your basement, right? So those numbers are pathetically small. They're disastrously small, right? And so that is effectively what we're competing for, right? So Dfinity, Algorand, us, Thunder. Many of us will launch this year. Some of us will launch next year. There's going to be 10 layer 1 protocols competing for 1.7 thousand daily active users, right? So we have this metaphor, which we really like, which is Building a protocol today that scales is effectively building a stadium in the middle of the desert, right? It's a huge stadium. It can fit a lot of people. It's a beautiful stadium. It's way better than the stadium that was there before. But if there's nobody to come to the games, it's pretty useless, right? But now the blockchain is very promising technology, right? It provides us a lot of properties that do not exist without the blockchain. So why does it happen that so few people actually care? To understand that, let's walk through 6 easy steps that we need to take in order to buy a CryptoKitty today, right? So let's say I heard about CryptoKitties from someone, and I want to buy one. Nothing can be easier. I go to a Firefox store. I install MetaMask. Then I create a key pair in the MetaMask. When I finish creating a key pair, it will give me a secret phrase, which I don't care yet about, but it will not let me proceed until I recite it without being able to copy-paste it. Then, as I do that, I will need Ether, so I need to go register on Coinbase. I will need to go through KYC. For that, I will have to send a copy of my passport to them, wait for 5 days, ultimately buy Ether. So I have to make a purchase before I got any value from the application. Move Ether to MetaMask, which in itself is not a trivial operation. And then, yay, I can buy a CryptoKitty. Right, I can finally play the game. Well, actually, not quite. Now I need to wait for 20 seconds for every single action I'm trying to take within the game. Right. So given that this is the onboarding for absolutely every application today in blockchain, it is not actually very surprising that we have so few people actually using them. Right. And so we talked to majority of the top applications, to IDEX, Augur, CryptoKitties, and many others. And those of them who are open to share their drop-off rate report whooping 97% of people who drop off during this onboarding process. So out of 100 people who want to play the game or use the decentralized exchange or using any application, only 3 people ultimately go through. Right. So no matter how good your marketing is, how good your product is, for as long as this is the case, that's going to be the daily active users we're going to observe. Right. But there is a question here. The question is, the blockchain still has a lot of offer to people, right? The blockchain offers you privacy that you do not get if you use applications in Web 2. The blockchain offers you security. Blockchain offers you decentralization. Why those do not outweigh the hassle that you have to go through to buy a CryptoKitty? Because importantly, if you think about it, once you went through all those steps, you don't go through them again, right? So most of you who actually went through those steps, today you can actually use Web3 applications easily, right? Maybe the latency is still unpleasant, but the rest of the steps you don't have to go through anymore. The reason for that is because if you scale, so on the x-axis, I have the number of fucks people give about privacy and security on the scale from 0 to some. And the y-axis, I have the number of people who actually give that many fucks. And realistically, majority of people do not care at all, right? And so majority of people will always choose convenience. Right, if you approach your random friend who's not into blockchain, who like uses Instagram on a daily basis, and you tell them, Instagram is actually collecting data on you, and the data will be used against you in a very unpleasant ways. Or even worse, Google, right? Google knows absolutely everything about you. There's not a single tiny piece of your life which Google is not aware of. People still don't care. People don't use DuckDuckGo. People don't stop using social networks. And so while we're still building a sharded blockchain, we pivoted our primary mission from building a very the most scalable data blockchain to building the most usable blockchain. Effectively, our mission became to develop such a blockchain that development for it should be as trivial as building a Node.js application. Right? There's like millions of developers who build using Node.js. And people know how to do that. That's something that many people are familiar with. So if we make it such that it is no harder to build an application on blockchain than it is to build a Node.js application, we're tapping into 1 million developers today who would be able to do that. Right? If any of you wrote anything in Solidity, I suspect most of you did, that is very far from the experience we want. And the second part of the mission is, once such an application is built and deployed, for any user on the internet to use that application, it should be no harder than just opening a URL and interacting with the application. People should not have to go through any steps that I listed in the CryptoKitty example before the application has actually proven useful to the user, and user actually needs to use something on the application which requires the blockchain. So I have this incomplete list of steps that we need to take if we want to succeed in that. Step number 1 is faster blockchain. That's something we already discussed. Sharding is one solution. There are other solutions. There is layer 2, plasmas, state channels. Those are all good steps towards faster blockchains. There should be no browser plugins, right? If we want people to just go and start interacting with the website, they should not have to install a browser plugin. There should be no gas fees, and there should be no key management. So let's start with the simplest one. How can we remove the browser plugin from the picture, right? How can we take Ethereum as of today, take a distributed application that is built for Ethereum, and make it such that a user can start using such an application without installing MetaMask? Well, the only problem that exists, and the reason why MetaMask exists, is that in order to interact with blockchain, the browser needs somehow to sign the transactions, right? So to interact with blockchain, the way you change the state of the blockchain is you send transactions which are signed with your private key, right? And so there's got to be that code. The code that signs the transaction that has access to your private key has to exist somewhere. So if you install MetaMask, MetaMask is where that code exists, right? Once you have a browser plugin, or similarly on the phone, if you have a wallet application, that's where the transaction signature is happening, right? If we remove the browser plugin, then it's got to be the case that that transaction signing code exists somewhere. It's got to be hosted. So right now, like if I just open a freshly purchased Mac, that Mac does not have the code that will sign the transaction. So if I want to interact with blockchain by opening a website, that website needs to send me the code that will be signing the transaction. From here, no matter where the private key is stored, it could be encrypted in my local storage in the browser. It could be encrypted in the hosted wallet storage. That code that signs the transaction at some point must have access to that private key, if you think about it, to actually sign the transaction, right? So that code that the hosted wallet sends me to sign a transaction, at some point, no matter where originally the private key will be coming from, we'll have that private key decrypted, available to sign the transaction, which naturally implies that the very next moment you open the same hosted wallet, that code can change to something that, right before signing the transaction, sends that private key to the remote server, right? So the implication of that is that it is absolutely impossible to have a hosted wallet which cannot, in principle, compromise your private key and get access to it. And so, for example, the most popular solution, the most popular hosted wallet on Ethereum, which is Portis, a competitor of MetaMask, they claim that they don't have that problem, but clearly you can see that it cannot possibly be the case that they do not have it, right? However, why? Let's first understand why, to begin with, we actually have browser plugins, gas fees, or the private keys. The reason for that is that if you have $1 million worth of Bitcoin, you want to have as high security as possible. And all those steps you take, they are designed for you to have that security, right? If you own the code that signs the transactions, if you own your private key, it is impossible for anyone to steal your 1 million Bitcoins. But if all you want to do is actually buy a CryptoKitty, which is probably like worth 10 cents, or make a bet on Barcelona winning over Manchester United in a few days, you probably don't really care about 2048 bits of security. It will be more than sufficient for you to just use your Facebook login and trust the remote entity that they will not steal your funds. Because in principle, it is highly, there is no incentive for the, like let's say it's Augur, a betting platform, right? There's no incentive for them actually to steal your money. What they lose by losing the reputation is significantly higher than what they gain by stealing someone's small bet. So from here, you can plot a progression. We call it progressive security, right? You can say on the very left, you will have the lowest usability but the highest security. To get the highest security, you need to install MetaMask. But also, not just install MetaMask. If you're installing MetaMask from a Firefox store, you're actually still not getting any security because you have no idea what you're downloading. You need to trust multiple entities in doing so. First of all, you need to trust the developer of MetaMask, that they did not upload anything malware together with the MetaMask plugin. Then you actually need to trust the Firefox store that they did not send you something which is not MetaMask when you were downloading it, right? So when you install MetaMask from store, you're actually only marginally more secure than if you're using a hosted wallet. And so on the very far right end, we will have highest usability, lowest security. That would be a hosted wallet, right? You open a website, the code that will sign transaction is served to you. The private key, no matter where it is stored, ultimately can get accessed by them, but you trust them. You know that they're probably not gonna misbehave. So what do hosted wallets give us? So let's say we all switch to hosted wallets. We all install Portis. As a matter of fact, they solve most of the problems that exist today. If you have a hosted wallet, you actually don't need to care about the keys yourself. Since they can get access to your keys anyway, you can just store your private keys in their database. You might even go as far as storing them unencrypted there, as long as you trust them not to get compromised. And once they store your private keys, they can provide a separate layer of authentication to you. It could be Facebook login, it could be Google login, it could be anything you use on the daily basis today. Naturally, you don't have a browser plugin. That's where we started from. And so that will provide you very low security, but it will provide you very high usability. The only question is, so let's say you started using CryptoKitties through a hosted wallet. How do you later upgrade? So at some point, let's say you actually get a CryptoKitty, which is very important for you, right? It could be CryptoKitty number 8, which is worth, I think, like $300,000 today. Or it could be a CryptoKitty number 5,070,000, but it just happens that you cannot live without that CryptoKitty anymore. You get very attached to it. The problem with the hosted wallet is that there is no way for you to upgrade the security. They are already in the possession of your private key. There is no such cryptographic primitive as forgetting a private key. It just doesn't exist. You cannot enforce someone to forget something, right? So there is no way, if you started using hosted wallet, to upgrade the security. So if you start using Portis today, your only way later to get back your security is to install MetaMask, create a brand new account, and move your assets from one account to another, which is problematic because not every asset is movable, and it's also it's a hassle. If you have hundreds of different tokens, fungible or non-fungible, that's a lot of effort and gas fees. So there's a solution for that as well, and it's also being built on Ethereum. It's called contract-based accounts, with the idea that your account is not defined by a public key. Your account could be a contract, where the contract has a method that effectively says whether the user is authorized or not. And then the contract can manage your keys. So in the simplest case, the contract will have one public key, and the method authorize will check if the signature on the transaction matches the public key, right? In this case, that contract will be undistinguishable from just having a private key locally and public, like an actual Ethereum account. But then you can go beyond that. You can have multiple keys, right? So if you have multiple devices, instead of trying to transfer your private key between devices, which on itself is actually pretty insecure, you can go to the second device, create a brand new private key, send the public key as a proposal to be included into your contract-based account, and then you approve that proposal from your original device using your existing private key. Now your contract-based account has two public keys, and your two devices can have two different private keys to access the account. So it already provides you more security in the process of transferring your keys, but it also gives you an ability to operate your account from a hosted wallet. If your account was contract-based to begin with, you would have one private key that the hosted wallet is aware of. And once you care about the security, you create another private key, you transfer ownership there, and using the new private key, you disallow the original private key from signing transactions. Right, does that make sense? Yeah. So contract-based account is a solution. The problem is contract-based accounts and hosted wallets on Ethereum don't work together today. Right? So there are solutions to both problems, but they don't work together. And that is a big problem in general of so it's very good when the ecosystem has developers that build together the tools and solutions, but they will always work worse together than if there's a centralized effort to actually build everything correctly in a tight group of developers, right? So this time, we as latecomers, we can actually have we have luxury of building all of those components properly. Everything that is known by now not to work, we can build it properly. So we have contracts-based accounts by default. There is no accounts which are not contracts. And we have hosted wallet provided by Near itself. Right? So from here, the progressive security just works. any application that is built for near can be immediately be used from a browser until the user actually wants to upgrade the security, in which case they can always do that because their account is a contract. So that more or less covers the part about usability on the user side. Right? So with all that instrumentation, you can easily, well, not easily, but you can build applications in such a way that the user will just open the website, start interacting with them until they actually need something more secure, in which case they can at any point upgrade. They can install a browser plugin, they can take ownership of their account, they can start paying. Oh, we didn't cover the gas fees, but there are also solutions. And so I have another section, relatively short section of the presentation, where I wanted to talk more about why, to begin with, we need all of that. So we all know one example, that's DeFi, decentralized finance. Decentralized finance is the emerging market for blockchain. That's something for that already has few very good applications, Maker, DYDX, and others. But decentralized finance on itself is not the only thing that can benefit from blockchains. The way I personally and Alex and many people at Near are highly motivated by the second biggest emerging market of blockchain, which is called Web3, which is an attempt to rebuild the entire internet without walled gardens. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know that walled gardens are bad, but I want to give you extra motivation to think about it and to think and to convert you to thinking with us on how to break the walled gardens. Right? And so here what we refer to by walled gardens is the huge monopolies that own internet today, such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. Right? With those companies, what happens today is that majority of services you use on a daily basis are services owned by those companies. Like if you look at your phone and you look at the applications you use, 9 out of 10 of those applications are going to be coming from one of the 5 companies I listed. Right? And there are many problems with that. Because you cannot really switch from them, they can start exercising their power and exercise it in a very bad way. So one of the biggest ones is there are huge privacy violations happening. Some of them are known, significantly more of them are not known. Right? The most known one, which was discovered recently, was the report by New York Times that Facebook was leaking intentionally data to other big companies to an extent that, according to the report, Facebook was sharing your private messages from the messenger with Netflix and Spotify for them to improve their services. Right? That's one thing that you definitely don't want to be shared with anyone if you think about it. The second problem is that when you use those services, right, so let's say you use Slack. Slack could be crucially important for you to do your work. However, you actually don't own any data that exists there. And at any point, you can lose access to the tools completely. So here's an example where someone's Slack account was banned just because they crossed the border of Iran. The only reason why the Slack was banned was because their geographical location was a country which was embargoed by the United States. Right? So now, if you want to do your work properly, because your entire team interaction depends on Slack. You cannot do your work as an engineer today in a company that uses Slack. If you don't have access to it, your account is banned just because you want to run. You cannot do your work, but you have no ownership of your account. Then the data you share with the applications, the way it's used is very non-transparent. It's sort of similar to the data privacy issues. But majority of applications, when you blindly give them permissions to what they want, majority of applications which ask you for the location, they all share that location with very few aggregators. And those aggregators from those thousands of applications, they gather information about large numbers of people moving around the Earth. Right? And so there was a report of that it was also, I think it was by New York Times, I'm not sure, where they got access to the data from one of those companies. And they saw, like you can completely deconstruct a life of a person just by looking at their movements. Right? Just by looking at where they go, you can say, OK, that got to be where the daycare is. This is where they work. You find the people who go to that daycare and that job. You narrow it down to a single person. And then on one day, you see them going somewhere which completely compromises them. Right? And that's, you have something against that person. And you don't need to go far to actually find someone who tracks every your location. If you go to your Google Maps and you bring the drawer from the left and you go to a feature called Timeline, you will actually find every movement you've made in the last months. Right? And it's a very convenient tool to remember where you went. But also, if you think about it, it's stored unencrypted on Google servers. How much do you trust Google not to lose your data, right? How much do you trust Google not to leak it, or some employee at Google not to try to look at it? Well, we can actually talk about reliability of Google. This is one of two of my favorite examples. In this example, there was a company that was maintaining a farm of windmills, and they had real-time monitoring of those windmills running on Google Cloud. The thing about real-time monitoring is that you cannot let that real-time monitoring go down. If your monitoring goes down, you don't know what happens to your windmills. You cannot react to malfunctions. You lose a lot of money. And so on one of the mornings, they receive an email from Google that says, you know what, we shut down all your instances. And we will erase all the data you have from those instances in 3 days, because we suspect that your card was used in a fraudulent, there was fraudulent activity on your card. Right? They've been using that card for 10 years with Google. And suddenly, because some weird machine learning algorithm they used triggered on that credit card, they shut down the entire cloud, the entire cluster of the mission-critical real-time monitoring tools. Right? So that's Google Cloud. Right? But yeah, we can use AWS. Amazon certainly doesn't have issues like that. So that's my second favorite example. That one is completely outrageous. There was one person whose entire digital life was completely destroyed in a very intricate way. What happened was that someone who knew just his birthday and his address called Amazon support and asked to add a new credit card to the account. And those were the only 2 questions that Amazon support asked, because adding a credit card, that's like nothing can go wrong, right? In the very worst case, a person will have a credit card they didn't add before. It's not something that will compromise the account, right? So all they asked for is the address and the birthday. After confirming that, they allowed to add the credit card. So they called the Amazon support again, and they said, I lost access to my account. Well, this requires more security. So this time they asked for address, for birthday, and for the last 4 digits of the credit card, right? Conveniently, they knew the last 4 digits of the credit card because they just added one, so they got access to the account. Once they went to the account, first of all, now we can shut down the entire windmill farm, but the person was not running AWS. Instead, they went to the page with the payment methods and saw the last 4 digits of the actual credit card the person uses. With that information, they called Apple. And they said, well, I lost access to my account. And, well, sure thing. What Apple asked was the address, the birthday, and the last 4 digits of the credit card. Something that Amazon thought was secure to show is everything that Apple needs to securely let you into the account. Once you get access to the Apple account, they recovered Google password to Apple account, they recovered Twitter password to Google account, and they obliterated all those accounts, which in itself is disastrously bad. But if you have access to someone's Apple account, you can do more. You can actually wipe out all the offline data as well. Right? There's a feature called Find My Mac, which many people have enabled, which enables you, if your Mac is stolen, to wipe it out. So they did it as well. Why not? And so they not only deleted every single online account of the person, they also completely erased all the offline information they had because of the security breaches of Amazon and Apple. Obviously, Apple and Amazon immediately fixed those breaches, right? Actually, no. 5 years after that date, someone managed to completely replicate the entire experience end-to-end again. Right? So nothing changes. You can actually try call Amazon today, and there's a decent chance you will be able to replicate it again. Right? So how confident you are that you want to run your windmill farm monitoring on Amazon after that, right? So, well, we can use Azure, right? Microsoft definitely doesn't do anything like that. Web3, if you think about it, can solve all the problems I just listed. In essence, each and every one can be solved if we rebuild the internet in a different way. If we build the internet as the set of open services with not just open source, but also open state, right? Then you know exactly when you interact with the service, you know exactly how your data is being used. You know exactly how it is stored. And the service cannot at any point block you from using your data, because what you can do on open state is you can replicate the service and continue using your data in a way that you want, right? And assuming that the blockchain has been around for a while and we have multiple clients which have been thoroughly tested, the uptime in security actually significantly higher, because there is no weird support operator who is completely unqualified who can actually give access to someone, and there's no single entity maintaining all the nodes. So for the downtime, you actually need either a critical bug in the software across all the clients for majority of them to go down, or you need some sort of attack which happens on the network level. There's a lot of value for users in that. If you're a user, all the problems I just listed are solved for you. But there's very little value for the developer, right? If you're a developer, there's actually very little value for you to build an open state service because someone can go and replicate it. If you're building a closed state service the way you do today, replicating is very hard, right? And one argument could be, well, but now there's a lot of value for users, so more users will use you today. But you remember the slide from the beginning with the chart about how much people give about privacy and security. So there are a few ways we think that might motivate developers. This is an active area of research. We don't have all the answers yet. One of them is it could be very helpful if the entire community is building those services, and those services are small services which own a small function, right? Sort of the Unix vision. Then it could be that it is significantly easier for you to build something. In a way, if you think about building in Python today, because in pip there's a library for absolutely everything you might ever need. In general, to build everything, you will write 20 lines of code that will just plug into 5 or 6 libraries from PIP, and then you're golden, right? So if we can build entire internet of those stateful services that you can build upon, that could be a value for a developer. And part of the value is that those services will not disappear, because the services sort of exist today. That's APIs. Like if you think about it, a stateful service is an API. But unless the API is backed by some huge company like Twilio, you cannot trust the API. You have no idea what API is actually serving you, whether what they're serving is actually meaningful. But also, you cannot be certain that the company that owns the API doesn't go bankrupt tomorrow and doesn't shut it down. And then your entire service depends on that API being live. Then you need an incentive model for the developers of the services. And this is one of the cool ideas that we are researching right now, which is when you send a transaction, and there's a payment for the transaction. There's a fee you're sending, but there's also a coin base which will be associated with the block. And today, the fee and the coin base entirely go to the miner, to the person who executed the transaction. If you think about it, there's no reason for that to be the case. There's no reason why part of that fee plus coin base will not go to the developers of all the services which were executed. So at that point, if your service is actually widely used, then it just monetizes itself. Right, so there's a motivation for a developer, for an indie developer in a small city somewhere back in hypothetical Lithuania. Now they actually have a meaningful business model. They can build a service which is useful, get it used, and then they will be getting paid just purely for the service existing. Cool. So that, as I said, developer motivation is an active area of research. We don't have all the answers. If I convinced you that we need to escape from the monopoly of the large players and that we need to find those solutions, I hope someone will start researching on those questions as well. That concludes my talk. We're near. Few things you should know. One is, if you never ever heard of Whiteboard series, this is something you absolutely should check out. That's something we do with other protocols. We invite other protocols to our office, or we meet with them anywhere where we can find a camera and a whiteboard. And we go very deep for an hour with them into the details of their technology. And we had episodes with Ethereum, with Polkadot, Cosmos, Plasma, state channels, Solana, and many others. There's a convenient short link near AI/whiteboard series, or you can just go to near protocol YouTube channel. And that's it. So try out our development experience. It's near.dev. Documentation is docs.nearprotocol.com. And also, I personally obsessed with vanity metrics. So please follow us on Twitter. That's critically important for me. Thank you.